Towson, Baltimore. Time. There's prosperity everywhere. I'm certainly going to see the Caps play, and they're heading to the West Coast. The Wizards heading to the West Coast, both in first place. And, of course, the Terps making the way into the Verizon Center this week. Luke Jones was down at the Xfinity Center on Saturday. They moved the game from Sunday to Saturday. And, of course, Sunday's my dad's birthday. I was going to honor him by going to the Terps game. They moved it along. But you spent the afternoon with the Mellow Trimble Awakening, Luke Jones, right? And no better time for that to come than on the eve of the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about where you and I were a week ago talking about this Maryland team that had lost 3 straight. Things were looking dire might be too strong, but we were talking about the minute possibility, if there was a possibility, of Maryland not making the NCAA tournament because they were struggling the way they did for really the entire month of February. And then what a difference a week makes. I mean, okay, going to Rutgers, it was a much-needed win, but it's certainly not anything impressive. But then you stack that with a win over Michigan State, and for Mello Trimble, it remains to be seen whether that was his last game in College Park, and we'll have plenty of time to discuss that. But if it was his final game at Xfinity Center, what a finale, what a player, how important he's been to the Mark Turgeon era. You think back to what guys like Joe Smith and Keith Booth meant to Gary Williams early on in his tenure, and the way that kind of turned things around. Think about where Maryland was 3 years ago. And Mello Trimble, it hasn't all been perfect, but it's clear that he's been the main guy over the better part of the last 3 seasons, and he hit his biggest shot of all, beating Michigan State, hitting a three-pointer with a second left. And like I said, again, if that was it, what a finale for Terps fans. But Terps hoping nothing final about that. They're hoping that's the start of a nice postseason run as they lock up the 3 seed, double bye, and we'll see them play on Friday night.
All right, so what do you like about the Terps right now and their chances this weekend? And I'll be flippant because it's what I do here, Luke. They don't really need to win this damn thing, right? I mean, and it usually wears teams out to win it. That being said, you don't want to lose it either, right?
Well, I mean, look, it'd be great to win it just because it's a conference tournament. They're playing in D.C. I mean, for all of the hand-wringing and all the complaining, and plenty of it justified, being in the ACC, seemingly playing in Greensboro or Charlotte or one of those cities along Tobacco Road for years and years in the ACC tournament, to have a chance to play the Big Ten tournament right down the road in D.C. at the Verizon Center, you'd like to have a nice showing. You'd certainly like to, no worse than get to Saturday. You get to the semifinals, a likely matchup with Wisconsin on Saturday afternoon, then you let the chips fall the way they're going to, and you can live with that. But you'd like to win on Friday night, get to the semifinals. If you can get farther than that, great. But all the drama that we were talking about a week ago, if there was any small chance of the Terps not making the NCAA tournament, well, that's they're a lock. I mean, they're absolutely a lock. I think most of the bracketologists kind of have them in that 6 range right now. Even if they were to lose on Friday night, do they fall from a 6 to a 7? Maybe. Again, it always depends what everyone else is going to do. But you're playing in your own backyard. You want to have a nice showing. I think for as much as we've talked about the Big Ten being down, there's some teams that are playing better. You look at Minnesota. You look at Iowa. Certainly Northwestern has had a season that they've been waiting there for a long, long time as they've gotten steadily better over the last year or two. You look at the top of the bracket, Purdue. Maryland was a stop away from beating that team not too terribly long ago. So, it's...
Well, Maryland's probably going to see Northwestern the first night, right? If not them, Ohio State probably, kind of, sort of, right? They're going to have their hands full in the first game, right?
Oh, yeah. That's why I said if they can at least get to Saturday, then whatever happens after that, I can live with that.
You lose to Wisconsin, you take Sunday off. I hear you, right?
Right. It's disappointing, but there's nothing where you say, well, they underachieved. That's my point. Get to Saturday. But this is a Big Ten that has gotten better. It's still not a great conference this year. We've talked about that throughout the season. It's why Maryland finishing number 3 seed in the Big Ten, and they're projected to be a number 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. That's all you really need to know about how this conference is perceived. And it was interesting, Ness, to hear the post game. Both Tom Izzo and Mark Turgeon kind of made their pitch for saying, "Hey, the Big Ten's not getting nearly enough credit." And is there some truth to that? Maybe.
Well, they've all beaten each other up pretty good.
Yeah, and but there is some validity to the idea that hey, Minnesota has gotten better, and Michigan State did get better as the year went on, and certainly Maryland saw firsthand Iowa's improvement. So you've got some decent teams once you get beyond the top 3 or 4, but it's clearly not the best year that the conference has had. But that's why I think there's a little more motivation for Maryland, for all these teams that are still either on the bubble or just trying to improve their standing, to have a good showing in D.C. So the way I look at this thing, I think it's pretty wide open. I don't think that Purdue is a massive favorite by any means. And at the same time, you could look at some of these teams that maybe only had that single bye. Would anyone be stunned if Michigan State gets to the championship game, or you see Northwestern upset a team or two? I wouldn't be shocked to see something like that. So I'm looking forward to this thing, and it's going to be fun to see that being local and again Maryland with a chance to kind of hold down the home court.
Have you ever done any of these tournaments? From a fan perspective, or even a media perspective? I have such fond memories, and you can go back and Google this for anybody out in the audience. This is where I tell Luke stories, bedtime stories. 30 years ago, it was 30 years ago, literally this week. My buddy Steve Cerrone and I went down to the Capitol Center, and he got a book. A book of he was very connected in college basketball circles. You've heard him on the program from time to time and know what a basketball historian Steve Cerrone is. But he got a book of tickets, which was like the toughest thing in the world to get. You had to be like a big-time donor back in the day to get offered tickets. It was a very hoi polloi crowd at the ACC tournament in 1987. And we wound up with a book of tickets in the Wake Forest draw somehow, some way, maybe through Muggsy. I don't even know how it happened, but that tournament was legendary, and I spent all 3 days down there. I saw at North Carolina State, Jim Valvano cut down the nets. They beat the J.R. Reed North Carolina team that year, and that was Shackelford was there, and Washburn, and Muggsy Bogues, and I don't even remember. Maryland took a facer first game, first day to North Carolina. They got the salt beat out of them by a good North Carolina team, but these tournaments, they don't come around that often. And there was an ACC tournament about a decade ago that I went to. Maryland wasn't very good at that particular point. I know a couple of years ago, last year, the ACC tournament showed up. Maryland wasn't there anymore. It was Virginia's tournament. But, this is really a compelling thing if you get a booklet of tickets and you go down there beginning, let's say, Thursday for 4 games where, Iowa and Indiana and Illinois and Michigan are playing, and Michigan State's probably going to be playing Nebraska. Northwestern's probably going to be playing Ohio State. And then on Friday, all day long, it really is something. It's special. It's different. It's unique. We haven't had a lot of that going on around here over my lifetime, quite frankly. So much so that I still hold that 87 ACC tournament very near and dear to my heart.
Well, you just have the pockets of fans. And look, there are going to be some of these teams that aren't going to have more than maybe a few dozen fans, maybe a small pep band, some cheerleaders.
See, I think that's different in D.C., bro, because I think there's all sorts of, transplanted people. I think there are plenty of Iowa people that don't have to get on a plane to go see Iowa play. Ditto, Illinois, India, all these places. I think this is going to be a real scene. I really do. One of the reasons I want to go down there is sort of drink it in and see what 8 sets of fans look like on Friday from the Big Ten.
Well, and so you have that, but I think you're always looking for those runs of greatness. I think back to when I was a kid watching the ACC. I wasn't there. I think it was in Greensboro. It was the year Randolph Childress went nuts for Wake Forest, and then clearly Maryland fans think John Gilchrist in '04. A Maryland team that entered that ACC tournament on the bubble, probably needing to win at least one game to get in.
That Duke kid is like 18 now, right? The kid that was crying?
Yeah. It's just it's crazy to think about that. But you're always looking for that, whether it's a Cinderella team like Maryland was in '04, I think they were, I want to say maybe the 7 seed off the top of my head. I could be wrong about that. But, you're looking for that team that can catch lightning in a bottle, that player who puts on a historic run of 3 or 4 games. And, in the case of Maryland here, it's a chance to play local. So you're looking to see something special. And, it's unique even compared to the NCAA tournament where with the big dance, you still have a day off in between games. You play the round of 64, and then you have a day off, and then you play the next round. This is bang, 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 bang every day. I mean, it's just it's intense. Certainly, depth is tested, and that's going to be what's going to be interesting for Maryland. We know front court depth is a concern for this team, no doubt. But you just look to see who gets a favorable matchup, who gets hot. Who gets cold, who has maybe an unfortunate injury at some point.
Yeah, who's not interested in playing, too, because that happens, too.
Oh, and that, no doubt. You mentioned, what was it? Was it 05, 06, when the ACC tournament was in D.C., and Maryland was clearly disinterested and was going through a late-season collapse. So, it's you have a lot of different variables at work. You have some teams that are desperate to have a good showing to try to get in. You have some teams like Maryland, quite frankly, and we'll see how they handle it, who are guaranteed as a lock to get into the NCAA tournament. So, how much motivation is there to try to
Yeah, the only thing Maryland needs to do Friday night is hydrate, literally, and show up. I mean, other than that, they're going to hear their name on Sunday night. There's a lot of desperation through this thing, a lot of desperation for jobs. I mean, I think my boy John Harbaugh's brother-in-law could be in trouble out there in Bloomington, right? I mean, there's a if they get waxed by Iowa, on Thursday night, that's tough sledding in a lot of places at the bottom of the conference, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, for all of the hype, and I remember you and I talked about Indiana being one of the preseason favorites in the Big Ten, and they finished 10th. I mean, Maryland was the team that was picked by everyone to finish 10th with all the turnover that they had, but, it's absolutely huge for teams like that. I mean, how about a team like Northwestern that is, on the cusp of making the NCAA tournament for the first time, period.
Right. They have to win.
Think, they want to. They want to remove any doubt. They want to show everyone that, hey, this isn't just squeaking in as an at-large. We want to have a nice run. We want to get to the semifinals or get to the championship of the Big Ten. So, you got lots of different teams with some interesting storylines here. The first day, Nebraska, Penn State, Ohio State, Rutgers. I mean, okay, there's not a whole lot of intrigue there. But, once you get beyond that, I mean, you've got some really interesting teams in that second round that are trying to solidify their NCAA standing. I mean, look at a team like Illinois, who made a late run. They're a team that's trying to prove that they belong, and they're a team that certainly has some work to do, I would think, to feel good about it. So, I mean, it's just it's always interesting to see these conference tournaments, and it's not the same as a mid-major or one of these lesser conferences where the tournament is everything because you're only getting one bid. It's clearly different for a major conference like the Big Ten, but there's still some intrigue. There's still some fun to all this, and especially with Maryland, or only 3 years into this Big Ten, not experiment because they're not going anywhere, but this Big Ten era, and there's still some. I still think it's fun to see that, and even cooler that it's going to be local.
Yeah, and we're not going to get this every year. It's going to be in New York next year, Madison Square Garden. They're going to move it a week back because of the Big East obligations that they've had there over the period of time and not getting the gym. But, this thing's going to be out in Chicago and Indianapolis. I'm sure it's going to be out in Minnesota before it's all over with as well, Minneapolis. So they'll be spreading this thing around over the next couple of years. But this is a big opportunity with Maryland having a real chance and a really good squad. And we'll look up on Sunday night and see where the seedings are. We'll see if they're a 6, a 5, a 4. Who knows? But they can play their way forward this week. It was good to see them hit the big shot with Melo against Michigan State over the weekend as well. Good year all the way around. Luke will be down there later on in the week covering all things Big Ten. You can find him, Luke, at WNST.net. He's also Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. I'm Nasty at WNST.net. We got our London road trip on sale right now. We're waiting for Green Bay, Nashville, Oakland, Minnesota, waiting for the NFL schedule to come out. That'll happen in middle of April. And, of course, we have the draft in late April, and Luke's going to be manning all things free agency this week. It's going to be a pretty active week, I would think, out in Owings Mills one way or another with cuts and then with potential signings later on in the week. You'll get it all first on the WNST text service. If there's any breaking news, any movement with Brandon Williams, you'll get it there. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is also there for anything you miss radio-wise all week long. I am having a banner week this week. It's going to be a great, great week of radio. So if you do miss anything, just download that TuneIn Radio app. Listen live whenever you want. And, of course, our morning newspaper delivers to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. I am a very available individual at nasty at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports